Still your love fought for me. And you have been so good to me. When I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. And you have been so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't earn it, I don't deserve it, till you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Lift it up. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming same God. You are the same God. You answered prayers back then, and you will answer now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You were providing then. You are providing now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You moved in power then. God moves in power now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You are a healer then. You are a healer now. You are the same God. You are the same God. You are a savior then. You are a savior now. You are the same God. You are the same. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness. On your faithfulness. Oh God, my God, I need you. Oh God, my God, I need you now. How I need you now, yeah. Oh rock of ages, I'm standing on your faithfulness. On your faithfulness. Thank you for singing with us. You can have a seat.
Hey, my name's Allie. This is Alex. It's so good to see you guys today. Happy President's Day weekend. For some of you, that means like a 3-day weekend. For some of you, your kids are going to be home all week. Some of you are just remembering that right now, so plan accordingly.
If it's your first time with us, we're so glad that you're here. On your way out, if you want to stop at the Information Center, there is someone named Kara down there who would love to give you a gift, talk to you about your experience, and answer any questions that you have. If you don't want to stop by the Information Center, that's totally fine. If you're at home, you can scan the QR code on your screen, or if you're in the room with us today, you can scan the QR code on the seat back behind you.
Our neighbors down the street at First Presbyterian Church in Babylon, they have a food pantry, and they're running low on some of their food items that they need. These are actually the items that they're looking for. You can take a picture of that, scan the QR code, or even find that list at communitychurch.net/give. What we are doing is collecting these items here by February 23rd. So you can bring the items and drop them in the bin that will be in the front of the church, or bring them in during a service. We're collecting all of them, and then we'll deliver them after that to help stock the pantry, and then they can continue to help the people in need.
And that's all we have for you today. So we're going to have Lou come on up here and jump into part 3 of our series, Hot Mess.
All right, well, this week we are in the third part of what we call a series called Hot Mess. Hot Mess, we're talking about relationships, not just romantic relationships, but friendships, professional relationships, workplace relationships, family relationships, all sorts of relationships. Because relationships are complicated. Have you ever realized that? Anybody ever realize that? Yeah, so like it's amazing. It's amazing if you think about it. Some of the greatest joy in life happens because of relationships. And at the same time, some of the greatest pain and hurt that happens in life is because of relationships. Relationships are a big part of life. And I mentioned on week 1 that there's this 85-year-long study that's been going on with Harvard where they found that people tend to measure the quality of their life based on the quality of their relationships. And so relationships matter. What we've been doing over the past few weeks is looking at some principles that will hopefully bring some clarity to the fog of relationships or some simplicity to the complexity of relationships. I don't have time to go into everything that we've covered over the past few weeks, but to bring it up to speed just a little bit, what we talked about on week 1 was how sometimes in relationships, our desires end up becoming expectations, meaning what I hope from someone, somewhere, someday out there eventually can become what I expect from you. And the reason that's so damaging is because what goes from a hope, like a desire, can become a feeling of indebtedness. Like expectations have this ability to push gratitude and with that connection and intimacy out of a relationship. And so the solution to that, we looked at the words of the Apostle Paul, who said, really the ideal that we're going for, especially if you're a follower of Jesus in a relationship, is called mutual submission, meaning it's not 50-50, like let's meet in the middle and both be equally unhappy. It's 100. That's the idea of intimacy. And really, I would argue that's what we were wired for in our relationships. Then the following week, last week, we talked about how different people have different needs. We're wired differently. And if that's true, then relationships, all of them, not just romantic relationships, but relationships, they're not copy-paste. They're custom-built. They're not one size fits all. And if that's true, then loving well, nurturing a relationship, it requires learning well. It requires understanding the other people in the relationships, whether that's in the workplace, in the family, or at home in a romantic relationship. Loving well requires learning well. So we've been talking about principles. Now here's what I want you to think about, okay? Or I'll ask you a question. You ever see, there's a documentary, it's called Free Solo. Anybody ever see that? All right, well, I did. It's about this guy he's a rock climber. He's an adrenaline junkie. He climbs these huge mountains, but he does it with no ropes and no harness. Yeah, it's exciting, and it makes for a fantastic documentary. But I feel like it's a pretty dumb idea. You know, you get one chance, one like, oops, and it's over. One time you lose your footing and it's over. That's it. If relationships are like climbing a mountain, if a relationship is like climbing a mountain, then over the last few weeks, we've been talking about skills, things you can develop to climb this mountain. But what we're talking about this week is the rope and harness. The thing that catches you when you fall. When you mess up, what happens? Is it over? Is that it? Do you get one chance? Or is there something, is there a way for us to be able to make mistakes and still keep moving forward? What we're talking about today is no one's favorite topic. It's conflict. But it is so important. Because a healthy approach to conflict, the ability to handle conflict, it's the harness and the rope in our attempt of climbing the mountain of a relationship, whatever relationship that might be. And it will determine whether or not you can make mistakes, or if the relationship just breaks, when things begin to fall apart. So let me ask you, how do you handle conflict? Think about that. What's your tendency? And I think it's important to recognize that no one, I mean, maybe you, I can't speak for you, but most people don't naturally handle conflict well. Most of us have a less than ideal way of handling it. So how do you handle yours? How do you tend to handle conflict? Maybe you're big and loud with it. Like maybe you're just upfront, say it like it is. You know, someone insults you, there's an issue, it's just kaboom, big, loud, emotional. They know it right away. And maybe that's how you handle it. And maybe that works for you. Or maybe it's ended up in some relationships kind of falling apart. Right? Maybe it gets big and things fall apart. Or maybe it gets big and by the second or third time, the other person in the relationship is scared. And so it's like, no. Or maybe you bury it. You know, it goes in and it goes way deep down. You know, and so you push. Like just pack it in. You know, and it starts to build and build and build until kaboom. You know, and then there's a laundry list of offenses, and they all come out. And you tried to look over them, but no. Or maybe you just avoid it altogether. Like maybe you process the pain, the offense, the issue. Maybe you process it internally, and you try to let it go. Or you try to forgive them. Like you forgive them. And they don't know they've offended you. They haven't told you, you haven't told them, but you've forgiven them, right? And so you just try to process it, and so they might do it again, but you deal with it internally. And what happens a lot in that kind of relationship is that there's not a big explosion, but if you watch the way you respond, eventually you just start to pull away from those relationships. Like the distance becomes larger and larger. It's a slow erosion of the relationship because there's pain and it's unresolved. If you and I don't know how to handle conflict in a healthy way, our relationships, they will either be short-lived or they'll be shallow. Right? Like if you climb the mountain without a harness, you're either going to just climb until you slip and then it's over, the relationship is done, or you won't climb because you're afraid of what's going to happen if you slip. And so you won't be vulnerable, and you won't develop trust. And where there's no trust, there's no meaningful connection or intimacy. And so if we learn how to handle conflict, and if we're not afraid of it, or if we have the courage, in spite of the fear that we have of conflict, to handle it in a healthy way, we'll climb higher than we would have been able to climb. Right? Those who climb the highest mountains are those who have the strongest harness. The more effectively we can handle conflict, the more resilient and enduring and meaningful our relationships will be. Fortunately for us, Jesus was a master when it came to conflict resolution. He had 12 disciples. These were the guys that he was handing off the whole enterprise to. Well, 11 of them at least. And they came from groups that hated each other. And yet he got these people to get along. Now they argued a lot, but eventually they got along and there was some pretty serious chemistry. And they came from backgrounds where their families would not have liked each other. And yet somehow he was able to get them to work together in community. A community that was attractive, a community that valued relationships, and a community that people wanted to be part of. And that's what he wants for us. And so in the very beginning of his teaching, this is recorded by a guy named Matthew, who was one of those guys who was involved in a lot of conflict. In one of his most famous teachings, we call it the Sermon on the Mount, which was a teaching on a mountain or like a big hill. He talks about how to handle conflict. First, he talks about the importance of handling it. And here's what he says. He says, Matthew writes, therefore, and he's quoting Jesus, if you're offering your gift at the altar, okay? So if you're going to express your religious devotion. Now for you and you might think of a church like this. Like you come here and maybe you sing a song or you worship God. You're going to do something that's going to connect you with God, express your gratitude with God. Maybe that's what you're picturing. And that's pretty easy. Depending on how far away you live, you drive here and you do your thing. For them, this is not what he's talking about. He's talking about something that didn't happen very often in the lives of the ancient religious people, but it was a big thing when it did. And their altar, where they went to go show their gratitude to God, it was not like down the road, and they didn't have a car to get there. If you were coming from a place called Galilee, it would have been about 70 miles. 70 miles on horseback or on the back of a donkey or walking even. This is a really, really big deal. Even if you're not coming from Galilee, even if you're coming from like 10 miles away, it's been a long time since I've walked 10 miles, and it's not something that's convenient or easy to do. So if you're getting ready to do this thing that would have taken a lot of planning, you would have to taken time off work, you would have had to put together travel plans, paid for those travel plans, and got whatever together that you were going to offer at the altar. He says, and there you're doing it, it's a big thing, you're looking forward to it. And there you remember that your brother or sister, someone in your community, has something against you. There's beef in the relationship. There you remember, think about what you think he might say. Okay, some of you know what he says, but if you don't, just imagine, what do you expect him to say? Oh, well, throw up a prayer for them real quick, Or handle that between you and God. Resolve it. Forgive them in your heart and then move on, right? Put God first. But that's not what he says. He says, if you realize someone has something against you, leave your gift there. Drop it in front of the altar. First, go. And be reconciled to them. Make peace. Restore that relationship. Then come and offer your gift. This is huge. What he's saying is, God can wait. God can wait. But don't put it on the back burner, because people matter too much. Our relationships matter too much to not handle the issues. For the sake of today, we could say, it's okay. It's okay to not be okay. That's going to happen. We're humans, right? We're going to step on each other's toes frequently. But it's not okay to stay that way. To Jesus, it was important that his followers recognized the value of relationships and did what they had to, even when it was extremely inconvenient, to go make things right. And so he said, leave it at the altar. In other words, things are not okay, especially if you're a follower of Jesus, right? Things are not okay this way if they're not okay this way. God has a problem when people have a problem with people and don't address it. And don't handle it, right? If you've got an issue with one of my kids, think about it like this. If you got an issue with one of my kids, you got an issue with me, right? So I would say, no, go solve the problem with them and then come back. And so what Jesus is starting out by saying is people matter. Relationships matter. Don't let these relationships just erode, dissolve, fall apart. And so then he presents a process, right? He's like, okay, well, here's how you do it. And this is later on. This is a few chapters later. It's still recorded by Matthew. But here's what he says. And this is where things get a little interesting, okay? So he says, now, if your brother or sister sins, other translations say sins against you. Don't get lost with this word sin. It has this idea of wronging someone, offending you. If there's an issue, someone does something and now there's an issue between the two of you, go, and point out their fault just between the two of you. Go to them, all right? Address the person. He says, if they listen to you, then you've won them over. Great. The relationship is back. You're where you should be. This is the process he's talking about. But doesn't always go so well. If they will not listen, if it doesn't end in reconciliation, then take one or two others along so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. He's quoting a Bible verse, okay? So you go right to them. They don't listen, then bring someone else along. Okay, getting interesting. Get ready for this. He says, if they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. He really said that. Allie and Alex, they were just up here before. Welcome. If you're new, scan the QR code. If you got beef with Tom, I'd like to come up here and share it together. We'll put it in the announcements, right? And then we'll all gang up on you. And then he says, and if they refuse to listen even to the church, then treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Amen. There's no song about this. Now, okay, this is a good exercise. Whenever you come to a passage like this and you're like, what the heck, right? This doesn't line up with Jesus, who, the self-sacrificing hero. The guy who's like, if you've got a problem with someone, like you're wiping a speck out of their eye, approach them with that level of gentleness. Like, love one, that guy, remember? He's like, all this. When it doesn't line up, you should stop. Be real, honest about what you feel when you're reading what you're reading, but then take it a little further, right? Like, what's actually being said here? Here's the process that I saw, okay? Maybe this is what you took away from it as well. Like, this is how it first hit when I read it. I'm like, okay, Jesus, so where are we going with this? Well, you call them out, then you gang up on them, then you shame them, then you cancel them. Done. Over. Right? So that's what it sounds like. Well, no, it's not actually what's happening here. What he's saying, and you'd be amazed to know how often this happens, and it makes perfect sense. He says this, right? First, you appeal to the person. You go directly to them. And this is important because this is not what we do naturally. We go and we tell Fred and Sally and Julie and everyone else that we've got beef with. And all of a sudden, there's 8 different versions of the story all trickling around us, right? No, like, go to them first. That's step 1. There's no point before step 1, all right? Then he says, if they won't listen, then you appeal to a larger perspective, right? Then you bring along someone else, an objective third party. You're not ganging up on them and getting your people to go address this person. You're getting another perspective. This is why we go to counselors. This is why we have things like mediators. Like, hey, let's get someone who's not so emotionally involved in this issue to weigh in on it toward, remember what the goal is, reconciliation. And what's amazing, when I've done this, right, when I've had someone else be part of the situation, what I often see is that, oh, I'm at fault here too, right? There's part of this, like, there's a reason why the other person isn't seeing the same thing I'm seeing. It's because I'm not seeing the whole picture, and this alternate perspective allows us to see this. It makes perfect sense. You've probably even done this before. Number 3, if they still won't listen, then you appeal to your shared principles. This is where he says, tell it to the church. Their church did not look like our church, right? It was a totally different thing. In fact, the word, it means gathering or assembly. It's talking about a group of people. He's saying, bring it to people who share the same values that you share. Now you're appealing to the authority both of you have submitted to, the beliefs, the values that both of you subscribe to. And if they still won't listen to the church, right, then you evaluate or reevaluate the position of the person. Position, it's not like the best word, but I wanted them to be 4 Ps, all right? The idea is like, maybe, this is where he says treat them like a tax collector, right, or a pagan. That sounds like an insult to us. That was not an insult. He's talking about people who don't believe the things that you believe. And do you know how you treat them? He's addressed this several different times. Tons of his friends were pagans and tax collectors. You love them and you try and win them over, but you don't address them like someone who shares your same values. And so it makes sense, right? Like, think about it like this, okay? Imagine, so I've got a dog. She's half golden retriever, half poodle. So she's a golden doodle, which doesn't sound that cool, but she's a great dog. All right, so let's say you've got one too, and I ask you, I'm like, hey, can you watch my dog for the next week? And I'm a member of the National Organization of Golden Doodle Ownership, all right? No go. And so as a member, I've got certain like expectations of you, and I go away for a week, I come back, and I look at my little like Ring camera, and I see, oh, like my dog has not gone for a walk all week. And I know as a no-go member that golden doodles need to be walked for a quarter mile every single day, and my dog has not been walked that much, all right? And so I go to you, and I'm like, hey, so what happened there? And you're like, yeah, I don't care, sorry, doesn't bother me. And I still feel like there's an issue. Okay, and so now I bring in another perspective. I get another member of the No-Go Society, and I'm like, hey, this person doesn't seem like we're on the same page. Can you bring in an alternate viewpoint here? And you're like, I don't care what that person says either. And then I'm like, okay, shared principles, right? So then I go get the handbook. And I'm like, all right, look, in the National Organization of Golden Doodle Ownerships, it says all golden doodles need to be walked for a quarter mile once a day. And if you're like, nah, sorry, still don't care, then what Jesus is saying here is like, oh, you think you're dealing with someone who's in that group, but maybe they never signed up for that group. Maybe they don't subscribe to the beliefs that you subscribe to. And so it doesn't mean cut them off and say goodbye forever. It means you can't appeal to those values, those principles. You handle that situation differently. Now, this is the way Jesus would say to go about it. It's important to recognize this is all toward making peace. But there are some exceptions to this process, right? If you have issues with someone at home, maybe, and it's become a dangerous situation. If you look at what Jesus says, like after you address the person, here, you never have to be alone with them again. And so the point is not to continue to put yourself in a dangerous situation. The Apostle Paul also adds to this later on in one of his letters. He says something extremely clarifying. He says, as much as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Right? There's a caveat there. Sometimes there are going to be people that are just not interested in having peace with you. Like they're done. They're done, and they won't forgive you, and you've owned it, or you've tried, but there's just no budging, you've been shunned. And so you've done what you can, you leave the door open, and you're open to peace when they're open to it. But if they won't have any of it, then it's out of your control. And so I think it's important to recognize those two things. You shouldn't be in a dangerous situation, and you should have healthy boundaries. Now, in my experience, this process, this making peace process, it most often, I would say maybe even 90+% of the time, can be solved in step one, in going to the person. But we need to know how to do it, right? Maybe you've tried it before and you've made it worse. You've gone to the person, but it's just exploded. Or maybe you don't want to go to the person because you're afraid you're going to make it worse. And so actually in the name of peace, you're like, you know what, I think it's probably better in the long term if I just don't address this at all. And so you don't address it because you don't want to make it worse. Recently, I came across this book. It's called Crucial Conversations. It lays out the process in, I think the simplest, clearest way. And while so same thing as last week, right? We ended with some super practical tools that you could use to plug in this principle. I want to do the same thing this morning. In the time we have left, I want to give you a super practical list. It's going to seem like a lot of information. And if you try to memorize it all, it's going to be overload. So you can take a picture of it at the end. We'll have it available online on our app. We'll put it in the YouTube description if you're watching online. So this way you don't have to feel like you have to memorize or record everything. But this, for me, has brought so much clarity to the complexity of a one-to-one confrontation, all right? Comes from a book called Crucial Conversations, and it's a simplified adaptation of his steps in that book, all right? So, step one, you ready? I'll give you a hypothetical. Imagine I'm home. I've made some grand meal for my wife, Allie. We're gonna have dinner at 6, and she doesn't show up until 7, and I see she's eating a Happy Meal on the way home, and she just walks into the bedroom like nothing happened, okay? I'm using that example because that has never happened. It will never happen. I don't cook. But maybe one day. All right, so now there's an issue. There's beef. Am I gonna bury it? Am I gonna forgive her in my heart, or am I gonna have a crucial conversation? All right, this is how you do it. Step one, know your motive. This is the most important step in the process. If your goal, this happens before you have the conversation. If your motive, if your goal is not to make peace, the rest of the steps don't work. And it's important to be honest and clear with yourself. Why do I want to have this conversation? Is it because I want to make peace? Or is it because I want to put them in their place? Or is it because I want to hurt back? Now, most of us wouldn't say we're trying to hurt back, but that's often why the conversation happens. You just can't take it anymore. It's like, you've done something that's made me feel like crap. Now I'm gonna say some things that make you feel like crap. And if that's the goal, then like peace is not something that's going to come from that. Is your goal to win? For me, that's usually the issue. When I have the wrong motive for going into a conversation, it's like, okay, well, I was wronged here. I'm gonna build an argument and I'm gonna win. If the goal is not making peace, the rest of the steps don't work. But if you value the relationship and the goal is reconciliation, then this works. Step 2, know your motive, know your story. Know your story. We are wired to think in stories, right? When we see something unfold, it is natural for us to just fill in the gaps of knowledge, right? We put in motives, we insert information where we don't have it. It's just totally natural. I'll give you an example. The other day, 2 days ago, I was driving down the road. I was getting ready to make a right on a red. All of a sudden, this huge SUV comes flying. It must have been like 90 miles an hour, right, on Montauk Highway. Blows by me and goes through the red light. And I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like I got furious right away. But there's a story. I'm picturing this guy like behind the wheel of his truck with the music blasting. You know, there's an image, there's information I'm inserting there. I don't know that that's what it was. Maybe he was on his way to the hospital. Maybe there's a kid choking in his backseat. I have no idea. But there's a story that we write. If you listen to Brené Brown, she's someone who researches emotions and things like shame. She would say, usually the stories we write in the beginning are terrible. In fact, she calls the first story, she calls it a BS rough draft. If you don't know what BS stands for, it stands for big stinky first draft. The idea is that it's pretty terrible. And so she would say, like, just get the first one out there and then throw it away and rewrite a better one. Try to give them the benefit of the doubt. If you're someone who's frequently offended, if you find that there's a lot of like constant hurt, like they did that and that hurts and he did that and this hurts, and you seem like you're more offended than most people in your life, this might be the most important step for you. And it might solve the problem for you right here. I was just talking to someone a couple days ago who said that they were upset their husband didn't take off for her birthday. And she's like, before I spoke to him, I just tried to get my story right in my head. And what I realized was I never told him I wanted to take off. I wanted him to take off for my birthday. And I'm expecting him to read my mind. And that's not fair. And so she's like, so I just wasn't upset with him anymore. And it's like, problem solved. Just because she solved the story. Now, in the story, if you're trying to know your story, the helpful form of the story is an identified offense. And you want to identify the result of the offense. Right? So in my little hypothetical, the offense is, I thought you were coming home at 6, you came home at 7. That's the offense. The offense is not, you're an ungrateful jerk. That's not the offense. The offense is an action, or it's a pattern of actions. It could be, this is the 3rd time that you've been an hour late for dinner at home. And so that's the offense. Right? And then from there, there's the result of the offense. Because of that, because you were an hour late, we've wasted food. Honestly, I'm feeling unappreciated. I'm feeling like you don't care. And I'm losing the desire to continue to do this. That's the offense and the result of the offense. So know your story, right? Now, you get the story out there. Now you're ready to like address them, okay? So all of this happens behind the scenes. It's just you and you, nobody else, okay? Now you go have the conversation. Step 1 in the conversation, this is number 3, is to share your motive. Share your motive. This might seem silly, but it's amazing how disarming this is. If you go into the conversation and simply say, look, I value our relationship and it's important to me that we're healthy, we're on the same page, and we're not holding things against each other. And so I just gotta get this out there. You'd be amazed to see how it just kind of puts things at ease. This just happened to me about a week and a half ago. Somebody took me out, said they wanted to go to lunch to talk about some stuff. I was like, oh, good, right? And then we go out to lunch, and I'm just getting ready to hear it. And he's my friend. He sits me down, and he goes, all right, look, you're one of my closest friends, and our relationship means a lot to me. And there's just a few things that aren't making sense. I want to clear them up. And as soon as he said that, I was like, oh, like I just relaxed. Like, that's right. We're great friends. And this is for the goal. The motive is making peace here. I don't have to be afraid of anything. it works. So just state, hey, you might be communicating something you're not intending to communicate, and I want to clear that up. From there, you share your story. Now, if it's going to go bad, this is where it goes bad, right? This is where you share the action, the offense, and the result of the offense. This is a lot of information, I know, and so I'm going to put up a little list here. You don't have to remember this, but I want you to have an idea of it. For this step in the process, I strongly suggest if you're in a romantic relationship with someone, it would be extremely helpful for you to have rules for the way you enter into conflict, right? Things that you do and don't do at this stage of the game. So this is the list that Allie and I have put together, right? It's not exhaustive, but just to give you an idea of it, it looks like this. We have rules, okay? When we're engaging in the back and forth, when I'm sharing my story, right? We deal with one issue at a time. So it's, hey, you were an hour late today, and I was expecting you to be here an hour earlier. That's the issue. It's not you were an hour late, and you left your clothes at the top of the steps, and I don't like the outfit that you wore, and your breath has been bad lately, and I don't like that. Otherwise, it's a mountain of where do I even begin? I didn't know I was in this much debt. So we handle one issue at a time. We always address, or try to. We try to address the action, not the person. And so it's like, you did this, not you are this. When you hear a you are statement come out of your mouth, that should be a red flag to you that now you're attacking a person, you're not addressing an action. We speak to heal, not to hurt. The goal is peace. And so if my words are being used to make the other side of the conflict feel pain, like that's a flag. It's a flag on the play. We call time out at that point, and we're like, hold on, I think we need to back up, cool off, and get back into this conversation when the goal has become making peace again. But if we're hurting each other in the conversation, it's not going anywhere helpful. And 4, I skipped over this, but be careful assigning motives. I can say, you made me feel like you don't appreciate me. I can't say you don't appreciate me, especially if you say, no, I do appreciate you. I can't override that. I can't tell you what's actually going on inside of you. So it's helpful. You don't have to adopt these. These may not work for you. But this for us, it just puts a little bit of like boundaries around how we're going to communicate when the stakes are high. 5 is listen to their story. You might be surprised. Listen to learn. Okay, so what was it like being on the other end of this? You might find out that maybe I never said I was expecting you to be home at 6. Maybe you thought that was tomorrow night. You might be surprised. Listen with the intent of learning. 6 is own your part in the story. In just about every one of these situations, when there's some kind of conflict, at least, after I've heard the story, at least like 1% is my fault. At least 1. Sometimes 90. But even if there's just 1, and I'm the first to say, hey, I'm sorry that I assumed you were ungrateful, right? Just own whatever the heck you can. It just opens the door for people to own where they've fallen short. Own your part of the story, even if it's a tiny part. 7, ask for what you want. If you don't make it clear what you want to come out of this conversation, you're not giving the person in the conversation the ability to get out of it with a win. And so if you just want to say, look, I just want to know that you understand the hurt that I feel, that's all I want, then say that. If it's, I want to know what you're going to do to make sure this doesn't happen again, say that. But clearly ask for what you want, and then lastly, take action. You don't want it to just be a conversation that you get out of. Number 8, take action. Just make sure that you follow up, that you do something. I know this sounds like a lot, but to come back to where we started, this is the rope and harness. This is what's going to determine whether or not your big conflict means that relationship is over. This is going to be determined whether or not your next issue brings you closer together with that person or pulls you further apart. It's not something any of us do naturally, but it's the harness that catches us and allows us to keep climbing. Those Those who climb the highest mountains are those who have the strongest harness. Those who have the deepest and most meaningful relationships are those who are willing and able to navigate the complexity of conflict. It's hard. It takes being brave, but it's worth it. It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way because we were made to be in community with one another. We're just about out of time, but I'm going to ask the band to come back up here. I'll leave you with this story. So about a year ago, no, not a year ago, about 7 years ago, I told this story a year ago. About 7 or 8 years ago, I sat down with my best friend. This is a guy I had gotten to know really well. We would have guys' night every Thursday night. We'd play basketball together, play Madden together. He's somebody that I really began to confide in, tell him my struggles, my insecurities, my issues. He was the guy that I went to. He was always in my corner. And one night, several years ago, we were in my backyard. It was me, him, and some other friends. We were in a circle, and we had a campfire. And I shared something. That was required me to be vulnerable. Something that meant a lot to me, something I had been thinking about for a long time, and I shared it with the group. It was people I was really close with. And the way he responded felt like an attack. I felt not only criticized, but I felt like my motives were being challenged. And out of everyone in the group, I felt like the strongest sense of resistance from him, and it didn't make sense. And I felt like I had to defend myself. I was getting all flustered, but it was weird. It went on for a little while, and then eventually it kind of stopped, and people hung out for a little while longer, and then we all went home. And as soon as he left, I turned to my wife and I was like, "Did you see that? Do you believe what just unfolded?" It wasn't just that it happened; it was who it came from. And there are seasons in my life where that would have been it. That was the hand that slipped off the ledge. That was the foot that lost its footing. There's seasons in my life where I've been yeah, you know what? I thought he was something else. I thought he was there to support me, but I guess not. I thought I could trust him, but I guess not. I thought we were cool. I thought he was in my corner, but I guess not. I guess things are different. And there are seasons in my life where I would have said, that's it. And maybe I would have stopped talking to him. Maybe I would have just created distance. Maybe I would have just looked at him differently for a long time, but it would have damaged the relationship. But fortunately, I had someone in my life, specifically my wife at that time, who was no, you need to go to him, which was the last place that I wanted to go. And so the next day, I just called him early in the morning. I was like, "Hey, can I come to your office, soon? I just need 5-10 minutes of your time, but there's something we got to talk about." And I didn't know all the steps, and I didn't do it perfectly. And even if I did know the steps, I wouldn't have done it perfectly. But I just shared, "Hey, look, I felt like you should have been in my corner, and instead I felt like we were battling each other in front of everybody else." It was in a moment of vulnerability for me. And the look on his face was all I needed to see. He was shocked to know that he had made me feel the way that he did. Shocked that I didn't feel his support. Shocked that I felt like my integrity was challenged. And it was probably because I was feeling vulnerable and was too sensitive in the moment. But just seeing his face told me everything that I needed to know. And he apologized, and I apologized for thinking that he was trying to say what he was saying. And from there, what I can tell you is that we left that conversation closer than we went into the conversation before the campfire. Our relationship was actually better because of that conflict. And that's the idea behind all of this. This is not about what's right, it's about what's best. It's about Jesus giving us the tools to navigate the reality of the human condition. We're broken people. We're gonna step on each other's toes. We're gonna insult each other, sometimes unintentionally and sometimes intentionally. And still, we can come out stronger for it if we're willing to navigate the complexity of conflict. If we're okay with not being okay, but don't want to stay that way. Let's pray. God, we're grateful that you came to us to make peace. That you are the initiator of the reconciliation between us and you. And it's in light of that we want to follow that example. God, we want to be the kind of people, not the kind of people who always get it right, but the kind of people who are willing to recognize when we've gone wrong. We want to be the kind of people that fight for relationships, that chase each other down, that fight till things are restored, that do what you've done for us. And so for the people that have come to mind over the last 30 minutes, for the relationships that have come to mind over the last 30 minutes, God, would you give us the wisdom to know what you want us to do? And would you give us the courage that it takes to do it? Help us to be people that do the hard thing for the sake of one another. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
We're going to sing one more song. You're invited to stand and join us.
I know who I am, 'cause I know who you are. The cross of salvation was only the start. Now I am chosen, I'm free and forgiven. I have a future, and it's worth living. I know who I am, 'cause I know who you are. The cross of salvation was only the start. Now I am chosen, I'm free and forgiven.
so much for joining us. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.